Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I am so excited to be here. Welcome to Bread for the City's Breaking Bread's Women History Month conversation. So we have a panel of dynamic and diverse women who are doing a range of work in the city and around the nation, advocating for social issues. And we wanted to have this conversation to talk about in Women's History Month to talk about the contributions that women make to advocacy and policy efforts and some of the emotional and invisible labor that also goes along with doing this work. And so excited to hear from our distinguished panelists, who I will introduce momentarily. And I won't talk too long, but because I really want you to be able to hear from them. So our first panelist is Nisha Patel, who is a national expert on social and economic mobility for families living on low incomes. Our second panelist is Rebecca Lindhurst, a managing attorney at Bread for the City, focused on housing initiatives and the Community Lawyering Project. And then our last panelist today is Christie Gardner, who is an advocate for community justice and equity, racial, economic, and health work, and is a founding board member of the Douglas Community Land Trust and serves as the secretary for the Client Advisory Council at Bread for the City. So welcome. Thank you all for being here. Really excited to hear from you all today. So I won't waste any time. I will jump into our first question and would love to hear from each of you to talk about a little bit, just because we are in Women's History Month, what is across the world or locally here in the DMV, what advocacy efforts led by women inspire you and your work and why? And we'll hear from Nisha and then move to Christie and then Rebecca in that order.
Okay, thank you, Nicole, and thanks to Bread for the City for organizing this conversation. So I have so many shout outs I'd love to do because there's so many great women of color in particular, who are leading advocacy work right here in DC. And I think I would love to lift up Mothers Outreach Network, which is led by Melody Webb, and the work that they are doing, they have been doing to stand up the DC Guaranteed Income Coalition, which includes organizations from across the city, including Bread for the City. So shout outs to Brittany Pope and Mandy Kova, two women at Bread who are contributing to that coalition. And then I would love to lift up Spaces in Action, led by LaDawn Love, for the work that they are doing, along with a number of these are all Black women-led organizations, DC Action, DC Fiscal Policy Institute, for the work that they have done on the Under 3 DC campaign. And, and why? Because these are all women who have created inclusive spaces where all are welcome, where people from across the city can bring their full selves into the work and use their stories to shift policy and to shift narrative. And they're winning, like they are winning tangible gains. In the case of DC Guaranteed Income Coalition and others, the DC Council last year allocated $1.5 million for guaranteed income pilots in the city. In the case of, the Under 3 DC campaign, those coalitions won significant wage increases and supplements, $10,000 to $14,000 for early childhood teachers, the majority of whom are women of color in the city. So we have, despite challenges, we have lots to celebrate in DC.
Beautiful, Nisha. Thank you for sharing that. Chrissy, the same question for you. Would love to hear your thoughts about who's inspiring you in this work.
I've always admired Aja Taylor, who's the advocate. She's the director of the advocacy at Bread for the City, and Linda Brown, who's the Southeast director. And one other person, Judy Davison. There have been so many things that they have, each one of them have helped me with. One's computer, one is advocacy, and one is leadership. So those are the three women that have inspired me.
Move to Rebecca and then.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for this opportunity. I would say that my inspiration really are the women who lead and who advocate for public housing residents. So much of public housing is in jeopardy right now, and across the country, not just here in DC. It's women who are public housing residents who are leading the charge against demolition and destruction of public housing. And I have to give a special shout out or say that, recently we lost a champion here in DC, Deborah Frazier, who fought tooth and nail to save residents at Arthur Capper. So it's women like Deborah that moved me to continue to do this work and fight for residents living in subsidized and low income housing.
I love what each of you are saying about all of the women who are inspiring you, who kind of who support you in doing this work and really who are doing really meaningful work locally and nationally. So thank you for calling people's names into this space and really being explicit about who's holding all of the work that we're doing. I want to move us into a conversation just exploring what's happening, what's the landscape look like, and what current initiatives are happening either in guaranteed basic income or housing advocacy or health movements. And then what are you all seeing as women's roles in those movements? And specifically, what's exciting for you or what's concerning for you around that? What are you seeing as trends that you want to speak to and kind of lift up in this moment?
Jump in, Nicole, if you like. So, you said words that are music to my ears and something I spend a lot of my time on, which is guaranteed income. And one of the things that's exciting to me, I feel like if you look at the national media, you'll see stories about, oh, California's doing this and New York's doing that. But DC is actually, I feel like we don't get enough love. So I'm always excited to lift up my city. And we actually have a lot of really innovative work happening here in the city, much of which is being led by women. And we're kind of becoming a hub for innovation when it comes to guaranteed income and direct cash. I mean, I made some notes because there's so much happening. I don't want to leave folks out, but there's the work that started right at Bread with Thrive East of the River, which provided emergency cash to households, primarily in Wards 7 and 8 during COVID, that it became one of the largest direct cash transfer programs in the country. Many of the households were households led by women of color in the city who benefited from that program. I already mentioned the work of Mothers Outreach Network, but they're going to soon be standing up a pilot focused on Black mothers who are at risk of involvement in the child welfare system. We have funded by the city, the Strong Families, Strong Futures pilot at Martha's Table. Again, that is, it's women. That is going to be focused on new and expectant mothers. We have the Let's Go DMV pilot, which is a collaborative effort initiated by workers, including many women leaders, that's going to provide direct cash to displaced restaurant workers. We have the work of Lift DC, which has been doing quarterly cash transfers. They serve primarily women moms, primarily Black women across the city. And then, so a lot of these are philanthropically funded, but we have programs like DC Flex, which maybe is a good segue, to Rebecca. That is a program that is providing direct cash to families who are TANF participants living in market rate housing to ensure that they're able to pay their rent. So that's the exciting stuff. There's a lot of innovation happening. The concerning piece, is that pilots are great, but what we need is major structural and policy change. And what's concerning is we actually had an opportunity nationally to make this happen at large scale. We had in 2021 the child tax credit, which was expanded and made into, basically transformed into a monthly child benefit. So families with children were receiving up to $300 per child monthly as an advance, and if they were signed up, as a direct deposit into their account, which went a long way in reducing child poverty, and particularly dealing with structural racism in the tax code, because there were large numbers of kids of color, predominantly Black and Latinx, who under prior law were left out because their parents didn't earn enough money to qualify. So that changed in 2021, and we saw significant drops in child poverty, including in DC. What is concerning is that largely because of one senator who does not represent DC, a senator from West Virginia, Joe Manchin, who didn't support the extension of this proposal, we don't have it anymore. We don't have that going forward. And so what we're going to see is child poverty go up, and that's going to impact thousands of children, thousands of family in the district. And I can't help but think if DC were a state and we had two senators, that would have tipped the balance, and we could have cut child poverty permanently in the United States and in the city. So the political dynamics are really, really concerning to me.
Nisha, before we move to Rebecca to answer this question, I am really curious of what do you think is creating the conditions for some of these experiments or pilots to come to life? I hear you talking about like political will, but I'm really curious about what's making it so that people are having that are willing to do some of this stuff that might have not been politically feasible several years ago, or even in a pre-COVID world.
It's a great question, Nicole. I think even 3 years ago, much of the thinking, even among people who would describe themselves as progressive thinkers, was yes, we like this idea of guaranteed income, but politically that will never happen. Two things: it won't be politically feasible, folks are not going to go for it, and two, it won't be fiscally, just financially, it won't be possible because hey, 330 million Americans giving everybody $1,000 a month, we can't afford it. Well, then a crisis, a global crisis, a global pandemic happens, and everyone's experiencing crisis. And all of a sudden, we are able to find political will. And guess what? Congress is willing to take on debt to do it. And it's fascinating because there are folks who have been in crisis. Folks were in crisis prior to the pandemic. But I think because of inaccurate negative narratives about who is experiencing poverty and why they're experiencing poverty, there hadn't been the political will. But I think when the pandemic hit, and it hit everyone, and some people harder than others, but I think that communal experience led to a shift in political will to say, oh, wow. And I think for some people, maybe their eyes weren't open. They had their eyes opened into how much folks were struggling because of structural issues that had locked people out of opportunity. So, the pandemic has really shifted the political context. And my hope is that is a permanent shift, not just a temporary shift. And I think because we're starting to see like some signs that maybe it was temporary. It's like, oh, some folks have moved on and others are still struggling. And so how do we, I think, keep up the drumbeat for some of these things, especially because we've seen that they work.
Yeah.
Giving direct cash to folks actually works. Guess what? When people don't have access to enough resources and then they get access, they no longer experience poverty. It's a pretty simple equation.
I appreciate that. And then Rebecca, I see you shaking your head. I really want to get you into this to talk about like, what are you seeing and what's concerning to you?
Oh, so much. Nisha, I could just go and pull everything of what you said and tie it into housing. A housing crisis in the district is not new, right? We've been in housing crisis for at least a decade, if not longer. We lost half of our affordable housing stock between 2002 and 2010. And so we have been in crisis, but then the pandemic hit, and you're absolutely right. People started paying attention and started addressing the affordable housing crisis in new and in innovative ways. And I think that goes so much to, it's in our face now, and we are faced with a real crisis of people, or an exacerbated crisis, where restaurant workers and folks who lost jobs just couldn't afford the rent, and who were, sort of on the margins before, like one paycheck away from not being able to pay the rent. So an affordable housing crisis has been around for a while. Having a council that's starting to pay attention to things that we've been advocating for years. One of the things that was passed during temporary legislation or emergency legislation was that landlords shouldn't be able to file a case if someone owes less than $600. And we know from studies that landlords were serially filing cases for just 1 month's rent, and it was really mucking up people's rental history. And so legislation was passed as emergency or temporary, and now it has become permanent legislation. So that little fix, really is going to affect dozens, hundreds of tenants who get eviction notices each year. In terms of advocacy spaces, I mean, part of what came out of the crisis is that the Cancel Rent Coalition was formed, and a group of advocates suggesting that the rent should just be canceled, that people shouldn't have to pay rents during a pandemic. And they gained some traction. That's part of the reason we got extra protections for tenants. And that those protections will be lasting. There was so much that you said that I wanted to address, and now I'm forgetting all of it. Yeah, I also think that, this affects women, but you can't decouple it from race, right? Matthew Desmond wrote the book Evicted, and one of the lines that sticks with me is that he says that Black men are being locked up and Black women are being locked out. And that is so true. When you look at the numbers of people who are faced with eviction, just from our own data in our civil legal counsel project, pilot project, we see that 82% of the people that we represented in that project are people of color, and 67% of them are women. So it's remarkably, it's a stark reality that people just are really facing our crisis. Yeah, and I guess the hope piece of it, right, is that there's reason for sustained advocacy, and there's now a focus on eviction diversion, which is looking at a tenant's whole picture, not just let's put a Band-Aid on the eviction, but are people getting income that they're entitled to? Are people getting job training? Are kids getting health care? And really looking at more holistically. Bread's been doing that for years, but we're trying to convince the council that eviction diversion, getting in before eviction action is filed, really can help people. And frankly, rental assistance, there wasn't enough of it. We're still hoping for more. There's still a lot of people who need it.
Cool. Thank you, Rebecca. I want Christie to answer this question as well. And then I have another question that's kind of bubbling up for me that I'll ask you all. And Christie, really our question is, what current initiatives are happening in the advocacy spaces that you work on that are either exciting for you, or what are you seeing that's concerning regarding the advocacy work that you do?
Well, I work with One DC also. The secretary for the Client Advisory Council for Bread for the City. But I work with One DC and with Council to Rent. And it's so funny that myself, I applied for Stay DC, and they told me they were going to pay. And I know this is a little off the subject, but they told me they were going to pay November through January. And then they decided that they wasn't, because they said I'm not working. Well, I have a disability. I have health issues, and I have to have surgery on my hip. And I know this is a personal issue, but now I'm up for eviction and I need assistance. So all the things you all were telling me, I need to know about them. But we have been working with One DC and Bread for the City as far as getting especially Ward 8, giving them knowledge of the programs that are happening. I was with the Thrive program, which was very, very, very beneficial for me. And I work with a lot of organizations in DC, but that Council to Rent, we had over 4,000 signatures. We went to Trayvon's house to deliver him, but he wasn't there. But it's a lot of programs, a lot of organizations that are trying to deal with this eviction, and I really would I personally need some help with that. That's about it.
Thank you for sharing that. I think one of the things that I think is I wanted to hear from you all, that was just a question as you all were talking, was like, there seems to be so many interconnections between income and housing and health. And so I'm wondering if you all can speak to, Rebecca, you started to talk about some of the way that eviction diversion they're looking at holistically, like what are all the things that a tenant needs or needs access to. And so I'm wondering if you can speak to the shift that you all have seen in your work around looking more holistically at issues and the interconnection and interplay for multiple, right? Like, we're not just looking at housing, but we're also talking about basic income and health outcomes and all of that. And so can you share any insights that you have around why that is an important advocacy strategy in this particular moment?
Sure. I would be remiss if I didn't mention an exciting new collaboration. We've talked about One DC and Rock and the restaurant opportunities. And so Bread for the City is working with Legal Aid, Neighborhood Legal Services, Legal Counsel for the Elderly, Rising for Justice, and the DC Bar Pro Bono Center to collaborate with One DC, Empower DC, LEDC, and Rock, as well as Jobs with Justice, to do an eviction diversion project that actually will send will send canvassers out into the community to door knock people who are facing eviction. And the idea is that we will get the list of folks who are scheduled for a hearing or whose landlords have filed against them, and we are going to go to them directly, because so many barriers prevent people from getting to us, to getting to legal services organization. And whether it's our hours, we're only open 9 to 5, we don't have hours on Sunday, or people don't have phones, or people don't have access to transportation. And so there are so many barriers to getting people in to our doors or getting connected with lawyers. And that's how people end up signing bad agreements with their landlords. And so the idea is to get to people early in the process, get them counsel, get them hooked up with rental assistance. I mean, I think rental assistance is so needed, but I think if we take a step back and look at all of it from, a wider view, we're realizing that, we can throw money at this problem, but at the end of the day, people don't have enough money. They can't afford the rents. And as rents go up, incomes are staying the same. And so that's how we ended up here in this crisis, is that rents keep going up. The city council is now allowing landlords to take rent increases on people when we're still in an economic downturn. And so people aren't returned to work, and now they're going to be expected to pay rent again. So I think things like universal basic income, getting restaurant workers connected, Thrive, I think these are all great projects, but at the end of the day, we need more affordable housing. We need to create housing that is subsidized, and there just isn't enough of it. And we still have 40-some thousand people on the waiting list at the DC Housing Authority, and the waiting list is closed. So people really need housing that is according to their income, and that's safe and sanitary. I mean, so much of our housing stock is depleted and just in bad condition. So I think there are things happening, but there's still a really long way to go.
Christie, I would love to hear your thoughts on because you've worked with so many different organizations advocating on a really wide range of topics. How do you see these issues being really connected in the interplay between housing and income and health?
Well, I'm out in the community just about every day. I deliver I deliver fresh vegetables for those who can't get out. I have one woman with 8 kids. She's struggling. So I take them food. I have one with 5. I have one senior that hasn't been out of her house in 2 years. She had brain surgery when she was 76. And I mean, just to keep them eating, you know, I make sure I'm in the neighborhood every single day. And I have one little story to tell you. I went to North Carolina last weekend. This is really going to be real quick. And to buy a truck for $750. To make a long story short, they said I needed a starter, the mechanic. I went back to the couple. They gave me the truck, and I brought it all the way back. And I've been running all over DC now, trying to help people. With one, I work with One DC. I work with. We're trying to open up a grocery store, community grocery cooperative in Ward 7 and 8, because there's a food desert here in Ward 7 and 8. And we've been working really diligently to try to get this store open. It is so much that, and I don't want to say just one ward or, you know, but I know 7 and 8, we only have 2 grocery stores for over 150,000 residents. And the residents in Ward 8 and 7 mostly suffer from health issues. Yeah. Kidney failure, heart disease, and so they need healthy eating. So Bread for the City does provide bags. Martha Table provides bags, and I get these bags and I take them all throughout the city to make sure people are eating. But hopefully in the next future, in the next year or two, hopefully we can get this community grocery store open for Ward 8 and Ward 7.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that, Nisha. What are you, how are all these issues connected for you?
Yeah, you know, when I think about like all of these issues to me are about like are core to the issues I've been working on for 25 years, which is like, how do we create community-centered opportunity, economic opportunity? And, you know, some might say social and economic mobility. And I have a very holistic definition that I work from when I talk about that. So yes, money is important. We're not going to get around that. It's foundational. People have to have enough economic resources. But there's 2 other pieces, and these are these notions of having agency, having agency over your life and having a sense of belonging in your community. And how do we get to that? How do we foster that? So all different kinds of programs and support can matter. But this idea of a guaranteed income, one of the reasons I am a fan of that is that it provides a floor that none of us can like go below, right? People's basic human needs, basic human rights should be met. But there's also a piece around cash and income that is different than housing voucher or SNAP or food stamps. Like those programs are important, but they don't give human beings, all of us, the same level of agency. And I don't know, you know, Christie may be able to speak to this, like from Thrive. And there was the Urban Institute did an analysis of Thrive East of the River. People could use that cash to best meet their family needs. People know best what they need and what their families need. And what we saw is that I think the 2 biggest categories were housing. People needed to use that money to help pay rent and pay for housing, and food. People needed, yes, people can receive food from Bread and other organizations, but having cash gives people the ultimate agency to choose what is the food that best meets their family's needs. And you think about something like food stamps or SNAP. What if a family needs diapers? You can't buy that with food stamps. You can only purchase that with cash. What if you need to pay someone to care for your children? Okay, a child care voucher might work in certain places, but not every place. No. The only way you're going to get that coverage, let's say you're working a night shift and you have to pay someone to care for your children. Cash is going to be the most flexible solution. It's going to give you agency. And so one of the reasons, again, I'm a fan is that it can help address the housing challenge. It can help address food and nutrition challenges. Whatever the thing that your family is facing. So I really see cash as cutting across all the issues that we've talked about on this panel.
Beautiful.
Mhm.
So we're gonna move shortly to a Q&A where I see a question that already has popped up about housing specifically. So we'll get to that question. But I wanted to ask you all for our final question to speak to, again, this panel is around women in advocacy, and I'm really curious about your thoughts around why women are overrepresented and as advocates in these spaces for these issues, and then what can we as community members do to best support women who are impacted in leading social movements across race and gender. So a two-part question. You can speak to either part. I did a facilitator no, which is I asked two questions at the same time, but I think you all can handle it. And I really want folks to get your thoughts on that. So let's start with Christie, and then we'll have each of you speak to that.
Yes, I wanted to tell you about an organization, and it's called the WCEB, which is it's the Ward Economical Development Organization with Lamont Herald at UPO, and they provide, that is like a sort of an income. You get paid a stipend for getting people to talk to you about Ward 8, what's going on in Ward 8, the good and the bad. It's a great program if anyone wants to join. But there are so many things that are happening in DC as far as trying to help us. The Thrive program was excellent, but it was just that one time. I've been living here just about all my life, and right now I have, I need a hip replacement and I need my feet done. I have to have work on my feet, and I can't have the hip replacement until I have my feet done. So the health issue, so I can't work right now. I mean, I could work, but I really, because of my hip, I can't stand long. So I'm trying to work I'm with WC Smith. I'm trying to work with them, but it's been an issue with working and trying to get an income. I have no income. All I get is food stamps, and that's it. Advocacy is my life. I do this 24/7. You can ask anybody, they know Christie is out there helping everybody, even with my disability. But I wanted to point out about the UPO program, and it was something else that I can't remember what it is. And the diaper program, you can always get diapers at Martha's Table and Bread for the City. And we all know that. But
I love the
many
plugs for all the other programs around the city.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't know, and I'm trying to start a program called Christie's Community Connection, so I can get out there and put everybody and keep everyone informed. I'm a little nervous, so I feel like I'm
doing great. Thank you, Christie, for sharing that. Nisha, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, so your couple of questions, Nicole, why are so many women at the forefront of these advocacy movements, or are contributing so much of their time, compensated or uncompensated, as Christie shared? It's like, what do we consider work? There's a lot of uncompensated work that women are doing, but I think the why it's because women and women of color in particular, we are disproportionately impacted by these issues, by these structural and systemic barriers that are keeping us locked out of opportunity. And I think we know from experience that there is no cavalry coming to save women of color. We have to save ourselves. We have to advocate for ourselves and for our families and for our communities. And so I think that's the why. And I think your second question was around how can we better as a community support women advocates who are in these spaces. And I think one, it's recognizing and honoring the work, and recognizing the work, particularly the uncompensated work that's being done, and compensating folks, recognizing people's contributions. I mean, listening to Christie, Christie, you said, "Oh, I'm not working," but I'm listening to you working.
Yes, for sure.
In those streets, every day, helping get food to people, helping people know where they can get diapers. to me, that is work. So I just want to say that and to honor that.
Beautiful. Rebecca, for you, what do you think?
Yeah. I mean, women are caregivers at our core, right? And so women who do this work, and some of it is out of necessity, right? Those closest to the problem are closest to the solution is kind of what we say in the organizing space. That women step up because they have to, and because it's in their nature, right, to care for others. Christie is an amazing example of that. And I think it's embedded in communities of color that people just lift each other up, and women care for each other. They watch each other's babies. They go to the grocery store for each other. They take each other to doctor's appointments, and that community that is formed is really so crucial. And so when we talk about demolishing public housing complexes, it's not just a building, it's a community. It's people who are connected, whose church is around the corner, whose babysitter is upstairs. And so I'm sorry, that's not answering your question, but it does really show that that this work is, in so much, is carried in this country on the backs of Black women and women of color. And the only way to fix it is to completely dismantle the system, right? So we can throw money at the problem. We can throw diapers at people. We can not throw diapers, but we can give diapers to people. We can carry food bags to them. But the systems are broken. And until we get to the root, which is not something I think that any of these programs are stopgaps. And I think I said that earlier, but to really recognize the structural racism that exists in this country.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, because I think embedded in all of your responses is ideas that we can't ever stop helping people to meet their basic needs, while we're also dealing with some of the structural and institutional barriers that people face. And I think for some, people often say, like, where do you start? And now you do both, right? Like, you always do both, because I think also for communities of color, there can be a liberatory practice in really forming communities of care and taking care of one another that people sometimes miss. And so I appreciate the fact that in all your answers, you all spoke to really the range of possibilities around how we can be making sure that we are addressing some of the policy and structural things, and also some of the more tangible needs that people have. We're going to move into a Q&A portion of our time together. We would love folks to submit questions in the chat. And so, take a moment. What's your burning question? And we'll drop it in the chat, and we will make sure that we ask it. So we do already have one, and I want to direct this one to Rebecca, as folks are getting their questions submitted. But the question that Rachel Myers asks is, do you see the possibility of turning vacant office buildings into affordable housing in DC as feasible or promising?
I'm muted. Sorry. I think it's a great idea. As we learned the pandemic, we don't need to be in an office to do our work, right? So many businesses went to remote work, and large office buildings are vacant, and we continue to build those buildings, but so many are vacant. And I think if there were initiatives put forward by the city to convert those buildings, I think that's one really great idea. I am open to all of the ideas. In some communities, they're turning shipping containers into housing, micro houses, all of the ideas that are out there, more cooperatives to move people to home ownership. It's just we have to get creative, and that's at the root of that question, is what are the creative answers, or what are the creative ideas that we can put on the table to create creative ideas to create housing, more affordable housing. But I love that idea. And I don't know, if it's something the city's considering. The mayor did put some extra money in the budget this year, never enough, but it is definitely something that should be considered.
Beautiful. We have another question that came in, so I'm going to put this out to Christie, and if other folks want to, if we have time, other folks can respond to it. But how can women keep up this level of advocacy and emotional labor and caring for their own families? Like, what's the importance of rest and self-care in this work?
Well, I can address that. My mother is 86. She just turned 86, and my stepfather is a little younger than her. But at any rate, checking on them. My little sister, we pitch in to go check on them every day, or just a call. It has been, it's been. Professionally, I'm a CNA, so I have seen so many deaths with this pandemic. It's unbelievable. But it takes a village to raise, what is it? It takes a village to raise a village. I don't know how the saying goes, but between the elderly and the children, I have one little story I'm going to tell you about. I've babysitted all my life, free. I never charge anything. I had a little boy who lived next door to me. He was outside playing, and the woman who lived next door, it was her son, left him with a guy. The little boy was outside playing. He told him, "Don't go outside." He hit the little boy so hard he severed his liver. I was on TV about this. He severed his liver and he died. The little boy was 3 years old. And do you know what everyone said in the community? Why didn't you just give it to Miss Chris? I never charge for babysitting. It's just, that's just me. 3 years old, we have to help each other. There's so much that we can do. And Rebecca, I want to say, Rebecca, you are awesome. When I go to her, I've never seen anyone, when she's into her zone, she's awesome. And she's helped me in so many ways. And I also want to give a shout out to Randy Abramson, who's my doctor. Anything that I need at Bread for the City as far as my health, Randy's right there. I mean, we've also started a healthcare workers program, and we're being trained right now to go out in the community and inform people of health issues. And matter of fact, we're having a study hall tonight, and that's part of Bread for the City.
Beautiful. Can I interject and ask just what Nisha, if you wanted to just quickly respond to that, and then we'll move to closing.
Yeah, I mean, I just think, look, if we're going to have a revolution, we need to be rested. It takes energy, right? And we're all go, 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 go all the time. And I think it's in some ways, it has to be a cooperative, a communal experience. We need to have each other's back, right? Especially as women and women of color, step up so somebody else can take a break, and then somebody else is going to step up so you can take a break. I think that's the only way that it can happen. It's through that cooperation and having each other's back, and giving each other a break, creating space for each other to rest.
Nicole, if I can just say one quick thing, I know you want to move
absolutely.
on. We at Bread, we talk about trauma-informed care, and we really aren't recognizing as a community that there is so much trauma that people face. And when they walk in our doors, we don't know what they're carrying, but, eviction is trauma. it's a traumatic event, and we don't treat it that way. We treat it as a legal case, right? Or a financial case, right? But it is inflicting trauma on that family, and communities of color face so many traumatic events that just carrying all of that really speaks to the needing of rest and the care for each other. And Christie cares for so many people, but who's caring for Christie? Who's taking care of Christie? And I think that's really just such a great example of the burdens that women of color are carrying.
Thank you for saying that. I think we have one more question that just came in that I'm gonna make a decision and direct this to Nisha. It's a question about microfinancing and if you think it should be implemented to help women who want to start their own businesses in DC.
Absolutely. I think particularly in an economy like DC, supporting women, so many women are entrepreneurs and they don't have access to capital to do it. And there are some programs that are in the city. So for example, WakeIF has a program for women of color entrepreneurs. And so I would encourage folks to look into that. And I think really quickly, compared to the international context, one of the challenges is we have a different economy in DC than there may be in the global South and in developing countries. So you may need more capital in DC. So it might not be micro. Maybe it's mid-range level of capital, right? You might need more than micro, but absolutely, I think that is a promising strategy, particularly in a labor market where we have one of the highest minimum wages in the country at $15.20, and it's still not enough for folks. And so, you may be working a job, but how to take that side hustle and turn it into something that can actually create, it's unfortunate people have to have more than one job to make it, but for folks that are striving and trying to do it, let's liberate the capital and make it accessible to people.
I want to thank you each for your stories, your perspectives, for all of the work that you all are doing, both for yourselves and for communities in the city, right? It's deeply connected. And so we do this work because we want to see all of the conditions different. And so I just appreciate you all taking time to share your insights and thoughts and letting the conversation go wherever it needed to be for our time together. I want to pass it over to Ashley Dom of Bread for the City to close us out.
Thanks, Nicole. I think Liberate the Capital is such a great segue for me to hop on and say, hi, I'm Ashley Dom. I'm the Head of Advancement and Chief Development Officer at Bread for the City. Thanks, Nicole, so much for being with us. And Nisha, Rebecca, Christie, thank you so much for your time this morning and for providing some insight for those of us that are sitting back and listening about this subject, about women in advocacy, and also about what your day-to-days look like in this space. Many of us are so busy, just caught up in our own day-to-day, getting through what we're getting through. We support Bread for the City, but we're not always pulled in deeper to the work that's going on. And so for people who took the time out of their morning, supporters of Bread for the City, who took the time out of their morning to come and be with us this morning and listen to this amazing panel of women talk about their work, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to do that. These mornings that we get to be together with Breaking Bread are some of my favorite mornings because I get to have my, morning coffee and get brought in again to this space. And I always leave wondering, what else can I do? What can I do more? And maybe some of you on this morning are thinking the same thing. There's lots of ways that you can help. I really loved that last question that we were talking about, that you all were talking about in terms of how can women continue to sustain this work? And it's about having that backbench. So if you don't feel like you're as deeply involved in the work, there's so many ways to get involved. You can get involved at Bread for the City. It's a really great entree point. You can come and volunteer with us. Anytime people come in and volunteer for Bread for the City, you're getting a little bit of an insight into some of the needs out there in the community. I know Rebecca said something about throwing diapers. We don't throw diapers, but we do pack diapers, and we need more people to help pack diapers. That's one of the greatest ways that you can support at that very instant part of the need here that we have in the community, women and children here in Washington, D.C. go onto our website, breadforthecity.org. Go to the part that says ways to help and go to volunteer. You can sign up to pack diapers, you can sign up to pack food, and then you get to know some of our amazing staff, some of our amazing client leaders from the Client Advisory Council like Christie, and you can start asking, you know, how can I help? What else can I do? You know, how can I get involved in more direct action? How can I put myself out there and be part of these different movements? So thank you again, everybody, for joining us, but also thank you to our panelists and thank you to Nicole. You know, we really appreciate it. And I hope everyone takes a little bit of something from this conversation into the rest of your day. Thank you so much.